I am delighted to bring these two gentlemen together today. Of course, I'm joined by Nick Bryant, the journalist who first brought us the Epstein Client List, and good friend of the show, Ken Silva, who has recently uncovered some information that I think sheds new light on this whole subject. Nick, Ken, welcome to the show, guys.
Glad to be with you.
Hey, Jason.
There we go. Yeah, so listen, before we get underway, guys, why don't, Nick, can you tell everyone, for people who have perhaps been living under a rock and might not know about the incredible work that you've done, can you tell us how this Epstein Client List first came to light? Just give us that background, and then we'll get into the piece that Ken has recently uncovered.
I was digging around for information on Epstein in Florida. And I talked to a series of people, knocked on doors, pounded the pavement, those things that we tend to do. And at a certain point, a lawyer for a victim gave me Epstein's address book. And that was, I think that was one of the quantum leaps in our understanding of Epstein. I think the address book was a quantum leap. I think the Miami Herald articles were a quantum leap. And I think that the transcript documents that were released recently are quantum leap.
Absolutely. So the lawyer had given you this address book, but there was some pretty weird business going on with Epstein's butler that you had told us about, that he had tried to sell it. This seems like a terrible idea to begin with, and I guess, he unfortunately learned his lesson. He's really one of the only people involved in the whole Epstein ordeal to have been prosecuted, right? The butler, for trying to sell the address book.
He got 18 months in a federal prison. And Epstein was sentenced to 18 months, but he did 13 months in a county jail. So the butler had a much harsher sentence than Epstein did after molesting scores of underage girls.
And he's died now, isn't that correct, or am I mistaken?
He got cancer, yeah. He's no longer with us.
Unbelievable. So, I mean, that's an interesting wrinkle. Ken, you've done so much work tracking the obvious nonsense of the FBI. Why don't you tell everybody what it is that you've recently, this was fantastic, by the way. This is, as Nick said, digging around. This is, true investigative work. You've identified the FBI agent. What is it that you've discovered?
Well, I appreciate it and appreciate the chance to talk about this. I've never really considered myself an expert on the Epstein case, but this trove of 3 million documents is just kind of such a gold mine that it's really, if you just spend a little time in there searching for keywords, it's hard not to stumble into really juicy, like exclusive stories. And so I think I just searched the term undercover and came across documents related to what Nick was just talking about, the Alfredo Rodriguez saga. And that's where Epstein's butler, I guess he had the black book for a while. He got fired. And then when he was subpoenaed in relation to civil litigation about Epstein, he offered one of the attorneys, Bradley Edwards, the book for $50,000. But Edwards flipped and actually became an FBI informant. I think he was worried about the illegalities of what Rodriguez was proposing. So he goes to the FBI, and they have a undercover agent run a sting operation on Rodriguez and buy the book. And then that's what led to Rodriguez's arrest. And I found the identity of the undercover agent because I was going through these FBI memos, and one of them referenced a TFO Bruno, which is Task Force Officer Bruno, and then another duplicate memo, because these Epstein files have a lot of duplicates, but they're different redactions in different spots. So the exact same memo redacted the TFO Bruno part, but it had Jupiter Police Department, saying that's where the undercover comes from. He's a task force officer tasked to the FBI some task force. And so, you put two and two together, you Google Officer Bruno with Jupiter Police Department, and it didn't take long to find out this Paul Bruno guy. He had a lengthy career as an undercover cop. He even got into some shooting at one point where he had to kill somebody during an undercover drug buy. Pretty interesting career. And I had a couple people accuse me of like, oh, well, you're outing this guy. And no, he is in a bunch of affidavits and even Jupiter Police newsletters identifying him as somebody that goes undercover frequently. I just simply linked him to the Epstein case.
I mean, listen, this is DOJ documentation. You're doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. If they can't keep the guy's name redacted, they're the ones who have outed him.
They pulled the document down, so that.
Oh, yeah. Wow!
After
Amazing.
I reached out to the FBI, that's one of the 60,000 documents they've removed since then.
I guess they replaced it probably with Cash Patel's season tickets to the hockey. Probably he's got a Ranger box or something like that. So, Nick, I mean, the task force, this has got to be an FBI, JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force type thing with the Jupiter Police, right?
We saw the same thing with Maxwell. It was a combination of federal police and also local police.
Isn't that dangerous, though? I mean, yes, we want the FBI to be able to coordinate with local law enforcement, but it's been really controversial, the use of these terrorism task forces and the federalization of the FBI. Aren't there real serious dangers that we can get into when that sort of stuff goes on?
Well, I think with the FBI in its current condition, with Cash Patel at the head, I think that it's very problematic, and it's almost impossible to trust. Well, it is impossible to trust the FBI and also the Department of Justice at this point. Both are sticking to the story that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had no co-conspirators, which is worse than disingenuous. It's borderline psychotic.
It's absurd, I would agree. Now, I mean, listen, you're not going to find me defending Cash Patel. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But to be fair, it's not just him. We haven't been able to trust the FBI certainly since 1963 and prior, right? The FBI seems like a danger to American citizens more than a benefit.
Yeah, sorry, Nick.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, specifically with these task force officers, it's been my experience that these guys kind of almost do the dirty work in these undercover operations. I don't know why exactly that is. I get the sense that maybe local cops, they're really gung-ho to go undercover, and this is their big chance to work with the feds. Because I've had a couple cases where it's like the local cop tasked to the FBI is the one really doing some of the more egregious things. I covered a case of an undercover cop named Kelly Boaz who kind of helped set up this neo-Nazi FBI front group where they entrapped some people down in Florida. It was kind of like a Whitmer type case. And there was another task force officer I covered up in Chicago who wound up killing a local cop in a drunk driving accident. And that's been something that the FBI's covered up for the last 20 years, was that this guy was actually undercover at the time of his accident. So those are just two examples, but it really seems like, the task force officers are wild guys.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? They're probably considered expendable by the FBI. They can say, oh, this was the local police. We really didn't have anything to do with it. And as you said, I think a lot of these police officers, they figure, oh, I'm being seconded to the FBI. This is like a big upgrade. They even, they get spiffs and, payment for things and special equipment and stuff like that. I personally am very concerned about these JTTF task forces. But Nick, let's go back to the Butler. I mean, they're more focused on arresting the guy and sticking him in jail and now he's dead, wouldn't it have made more sense? I can't really put you in the shoes of the FBI. I know you're not in law enforcement, but why wouldn't they approach the guy and say, hey, look, this isn't what you want to do. Why don't you flip, become a witness for us, and tell us what you know about these people and what they were doing?
The FBI and the Department of Justice were actively covering this up. That is the problem. What I have found out recently that I didn't know was that I had heard that there was a grand jury that had been impaneled, but then it was adjourned. And then I heard that there wasn't a grand jury that was impaneled. And I didn't know specifically about whether or not Alexander Acosta in the Southern District of Florida impaneled a grand jury. Well, as it turns out, they did. And they drafted a 60-count indictment against Jeffrey Epstein. 60 counts, and count 51 was child trafficking, which is 15 to life. But all of that got quashed because there was so much heat put on Acosta to give Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal. And I think that the FBI did do some good work, investigated this fairly thoroughly to get a 60-count indictment. But it was quashed by the Bush administration, the Bush II administration.
Wow. That's something that we don't necessarily hear a whole lot about. Everybody wants to lay this whole Epstein debacle at the feet of Donald Trump. But I mean, here you're saying now, one of the most credible journalists who's covered this more than anybody, basically, or you're up there with all the others. You're saying now that it was going back to Bush. We rarely hear about Bush being associated with Epstein and cover-ups.
There's only two people in the government that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down. One is the attorney general and one is the president. That's it. And Alexander Acosta was going full speed ahead on indicting Jeffrey Epstein on, as I said, there was a 60-count indictment. And there's actually one of from the tranche of emails, Ken Starr and that quote unquote top brass from the FBI have to go visit Alexander Acosta to fire him up. So he listens to Alberto Gonzalez, who is the attorney general, because think about this, a U.S. attorney isn't going to cover up a massive pedophile network preemptively, unilaterally by himself. And I don't think an attorney general is either. So I think that the buck stopped with George Bush II. He was the guy that said, you guys have got to cover this up.
That's amazing. And so, I mean, a lot of people have seen this infamous photo or painting of Bill Clinton in the blue dress looking ridiculous. But we also have got this other painting of GWB playing with the paper airplane in front of the collapsed Jenga towers, this trove of Epstein documents that Ken was just referring to that everybody's been looking at has revealed all kinds of stuff about a shadow 9/11 commission that Ghislaine Maxwell was talking about. What have we learned, Nick, from the new trove of documents relative to Epstein and 9/11? And do you think any of that gives any kind of perhaps new meaning to this connection to George W.?
Well, I think Epstein is kind of driving at George W. having some kind of complicity in 9/11. As for myself and these documents, I have not focused on 9/11 at all at this point. I've been focusing in different areas. Ken might have a different take on that.
What do you think, Ken? George Bush, 9/11, Epstein?
I thought that photo of George Bush in the Jenga tower is not related to Epstein. Might want to fact check that. I'm not exactly sure, and I'm kind of with Nick. I haven't really looked into the 9/11 angle at all. I will say, when you were talking about, the FBI's investigation and why didn't they make Alfredo Rodriguez a cooperating witness? He did interview with the FBI, and he told them that he saw photographs of naked underage girls and girls with braces coming in and out of the house. He talked about John Luke Brunel. And after he gave them all this information, then they turned around and charged him. So
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess from their standpoint, maybe they're thinking once this guy is in jail and fearful that we're going to put him through the ringer, maybe we have more leverage over him. But it's a pretty bad position if you think about it, because it's not going to make too many other people want to cooperate with the FBI. Listen, this is my opinion. Nobody should take my advice. It's not legal advice. I'm not qualified to give legal advice, but I think you might as well go work for the mafia if you want to start cooperating with the FBI. It's almost inevitable that it's going to kind of bite you on the ass. But just getting back to the George Bush comment, at least according to Snopes, it looks like you're correct. And I don't know that it's important so much that this painting would or would not be associated with Jeffrey Epstein. It's what it suggests. And, this, I don't want to press it too far because you guys haven't looked into it, but the notion that, George Bush and Epstein and obviously everybody, well, I think everybody on this call would agree that Epstein is connected to Mossad, to Israel, to other international intelligence organizations. And there's a lot of evidence that many of those groups and individuals were connected to 9/11 and had foreknowledge. I think it's a kind of a rich vein to tap in terms of the Epstein files.
I think that Epstein was definitely an intelligence agent. I think he was working for Israeli intelligence and also American intelligence. I have a tendency to think that George Bush would not have quashed the case against Jeffrey Epstein and mandated that he get a sweetheart deal if he wasn't hooked up with U.S. intelligence.
And we actually have confirmation of that in the Epstein files. If you search for the term financial bounty hunter, there's a document that says that Epstein worked for the U.S. government as a, quote, financial bounty hunter. And this document doesn't have a header, so we don't know what agency wrote it. And there is a possibility that this was like a research memo put out by a private practice firm. But I'm pretty sure it is a government document because it talks about gathering information from other agencies to charge him. And I'm pretty sure this document comes from the U.S. Marshals because they were investigating Epstein in like 2018 and 2019 for violation of that international Megan's law referenced in the memo.
So, Ken, let's just take a step back to what you said. This is right here in the files. It's telling us from official documents that Epstein was a financial bounty hunter working for the U.S. government. Look, I don't speak for you guys. I'm not denying that Epstein seems unquestionably connected to Mossad and other intelligence agencies. But how can anyone at this point deny that he was a U.S. intelligence operative, asset, agent? What's the exact, description? I think a lot of people like to lawyer that type of word to death, but he's an intelligence guy as far as the average person would say, right?
According to the New York Times, he has no relationship whatsoever with intelligence.
Dershowitz too.
The New York Times published an 8,500 word document or article that deployed 8 times journalists, but they made some amazing omissions. They completely did not mention Adnan Khashoggi, who was in business with Epstein for a number of years. And the reason they didn't mention Adnan Khashoggi is because Adnan Khashoggi was part of Iran-Contra and the CIA arms dealing. And they also they mentioned that Epstein was in business with Stan Pottinger in the early 1980s. What they didn't mention is that Stan Pottinger was selling arms to Iran, an enemy combatant state, with the CIA. And they also didn't mention that Doug Leese was involved in various arms dealing with not only Iran, but that he had some kind of heavy duty connection with American intelligence. So the New York Times whiffed on a number of things that would have shown that Jeffrey Epstein did have connections to intelligence.
I mean, you're being a little bit diplomatic saying that they whiffed. It's almost like they're calling a strike a home run or something like that. And
yeah,
also,
and if you read,
yeah.
if you read Drop Site News, they've got a bunch of good articles on Epstein, like brokering deals for Israel, arms deals, selling various technology. I think he even tried to strike some deal with Mongolian for like some international security agreement. So yeah, the intelligence connections are pretty black and white, and I don't think any serious person can really dispute them at this point. I guess what remains to be proven is whether he was actually running a sexual blackmail operation on behalf of the intelligence agencies. Nick can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I haven't seen like smoking gun proof of that yet. I've seen a lot of evidence that maybe we can infer that was probably going on. But I guess that's like the biggest thing that's remained to be totally proven, from what I understand.
Because of my investigation with the Franklin scandal, I've kind of become fairly knowledgeable about that area. And I've said it before, it's really hard to show that people are blackmailers, because who's ever being blackmailed is not going to come forward because of what they're being blackmailed for. And I got to a blackmail photographer for the Franklin scandal, and because I was just kind of getting my mind around it, I asked him, how does this work? And maybe you guys have heard me share this analogy before, but he said, once you're compromised, it's like you're on a beautiful yacht and it's a beautiful day and you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. And I think that is the problem with sexual blackmail. There's nuances of it. You can tell that Jeffrey Epstein is leveraging Bill Gates in one of those emails. So, but to amass the kind of power that he did and the kind of connections that he did, I think that it definitely involved blackmail.
But
Khashoggi, and I just want to say, Adnan Khashoggi was big on blackmail too. So I don't know if Epstein got hooked up with blackmail because of Adnan Khashoggi or some other milieu. I just don't know.
But even just what you guys are speaking about right now, Adnan Khashoggi, Iran-Contra, as crazy as this seems, it's almost as if the blackmail, it's like peripheral to everything these guys were doing, right? I mean, people hear about underage sex trafficking, and it's one of the worst things anybody can do, of course, but it's like, how do you pick the worst thing that these guys are up to? It's a little bit, it's astounding, isn't it? Ken?
Yeah, and to Nick's point, demonstrating that he has leverage on people. If you look at how he talks to like Leon Black, who's, this big billionaire guy, he's really like almost taking him upside down and shaking the pennies out of his pocket. At one point, I think he even calls Leon's son a retard. So like, if you don't speak to somebody like that unless you have a little bit of leverage over them. Side note, Leon Black's son is in the Trump administration now, so there's another connection. And then, as far as evidence goes, I guess tying into this, I broke a story in English. I can't claim the exclusive on this because a French publication had already written about it, but there, in 2023, the FBI's New York field office was hacked. And there's a memo about the hackers accessed the Epstein files, and then over 100 terabytes of data were lost as a result of that intrusion. It doesn't say that specifically Epstein files were lost, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me.
So wait a minute, they were hacked, and then someone deleted or somehow removed the files? Is that what it is that they're... Oh, yeah, it was. I'm sure that's the goal of the hackers, not the people trying to cover up the Epstein scandal.
Yeah, well, it was the unit in the FBI that investigates child sex crimes, and over 500 terabytes of data went missing as a result of the intrusion. And according to the memo, they were able to recover 400 of it.
Terabytes.
100 terabytes was lost.
People need to stop for a second and understand what that means, okay? Megabytes are like old news. Gigabytes, okay, that's pretty big. Terabytes, a terabyte, 1 terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. And you're saying 500 terabytes of data went missing. And there's no evidence that Epstein, I mean, come on now.
Yeah, and that should be near the top of my Twitter timeline. I retweeted it before the show went on. Yeah, let me actually read.
Well, we're going to go into some depth on all of this, guys, and I hope everybody will stick around. We're going to continue in the sponsor exclusive segment. People are going to be able to join us on substack.com/@Ken Silva. Also on the Nick Bryant podcast. Nick, can you give everybody your Patreon channel? The video will be up on there later.
Actually, I would suggest that they go to EpsteinJustice.com.
Epstein Justice. There you go. EpsteinJustice.com. And of course, people are also going to be able to get the sponsor exclusive video that's coming up right after this on Patreon and Subscribestar for Crowdsource the Truth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Stay with us, everybody. We've got more with Nick Bryant and Ken Silva coming up in 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere.